And before we get into the start of navigation, we just want to say that the Chapman AAWT guidebook is excellent and certainly worth owning. It's invaluable for preparing. Even though you don't necessarily have to carry it with you on the trail, we think it's a really, really useful resource. So we highly recommend this for everyone, but we'll talk a bit more about it later.
Yes, the guidebook, if you're not religious, it can make you believe in a Bible, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm just going to go into a bit about the navigation on the track now. So the best way to describe the AAWT is as varied. The track quality is varied, the signage is varied, the difficulty is varied. The good thing about the AAWT is that it's remote and it's relatively uncrowded. You know, this is probably one of the big draw cards for a lot of you and why you're here. You know, it's much less established compared to something like the Bibbulmun Track or the Larapinta Trail. So this means that there are many sections where hikers, you know, you must be a competent navigator. And this is where we think that a GPS is really useful. Conceptually, the track itself can be broken down into thirds, where the further north you go, the easier it gets. The southern third from Walhalla to Mount Hotham is by far the most difficult part. And you'll notice that a lot of the time spent today will be talking about specific sections in that part. So the difficulties that you're going to encounter with navigation are largely broken down into two categories. The first is following overgrown or poorly marked trails, and the second is navigating open tussock country. Now, this can all sound quite intimidating, but I'm confident in saying that navigating the AAWT in general is quite easy with the right preparation. Where you can get caught out is when things go wrong. You know, it's much harder to navigate when it's been raining for 2 days and you're starting to go hypothermic, you know, or some thick fog rolls in and it makes it much harder to see, you know, or maybe something in the day slows you down and you end up walking in the dark. Or, you know, maybe you're running low on water and you start to feel rushed. These are all of the types of situations that can turn, you know, navigation that might be normally, you know, not too challenging. It can very quickly turn it into scenarios that seem much more difficult and with much higher consequences. All right, does anyone have any quick questions about that little overview? Cool.
Alrighty.
All right.
Great. Well, we're going to talk now a little bit about some different methods you can use to navigate. So there are many, many ways to navigate. There's no right or wrong way, but there are trade-offs between each method. Having said that, we have a preferred way to navigate, and that's what we're going to talk about first of all. So when we go hiking, we generally don't take physical maps. And we've done this for over 30,000 kilometers of hiking, and we're very confident in our system. As a pair, we carry 2 phones, 1 to 2 power banks, an InReach Mini, and sometimes we'll carry a GPS watch. This is a lot of items, but realistically, apart from the GPS watches, they're things we'd probably carry with us anyway. If you're hiking solo, it's slightly different because you don't have the redundancy of having another person's phone to navigate with if yours dies. So for solo hikers, we generally recommend carrying your phone, a backup navigation device such as a GPS watch or handheld GPS, and we also recommend putting the GPX files onto your InReach if you have one. It's really important, especially with the AAWT, to think about redundancy, especially if you're carrying especially if all your navigation is electronic. You know, you should have redundancy in your charging system. Maybe you have 2 power banks or multiple cables. You can even use head torches that have removable batteries as emergency power banks. And we think this is really important because somewhere like the AAWT, if your navigation system fails, it could be a long time before you see another hiker, and that could be a problem. Having said all that, there's no reason why you can't bring a physical map. You know, if you're set on bringing a physical map, we'd recommend using the maps in the Chapman guidebook. You can save the track notes on your phone and, you know, cut out the maps to carry them with you. But we personally don't think you need any more than that. Any questions with that?
That might be a hot take.
No questions?
Nope.
Excellent.
Cool. All right. So
yeah. Sorry, I got a question.
Yeah,
So, in the Chapman book, it says that like using the maps in the book is great for the trail, but like they reckon that the time when you might need the physical maps is if you need to plan an escape route. And I guess if you've got a GPS, you can kind of do that. But that was the only thing that made me like think, oh, maybe I should get them. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, for sure. So if you're looking at planning an escape route, you know, like it's pretty easy on your phone to look at those, like at one of those broader maps that have all of the big routes. And it's also something that if this is something that particularly worries you, you know, there's nothing to stop you from carrying, you know, like one of those bigger maps that has all of the escape routes marked. But realistically, in the Chapman book, your escape routes are when you cross like a sealed road, and you don't cross very many of them. Otherwise, you know, you're walking down like it's like you look at your feet and you're like, this is a well-trafficked gravel road, and you're just gonna sit there until someone comes and gets you, you know? Like the reality is that the detail in the maps in the Chapman book is enough already. You know, like you're not walking 100 Ks out to the nearest town. You're sitting at a road until a car comes along and picks you up, that type of thing.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Thank you.
I just have one more question. Do you guys still carry a compass then with you?
Yeah. So it's really really easy to get a small little compass that can just clip onto your watch, and it just sits here, and your watch has a compass, your phone has a compass, your inReach has a compass. And so yeah, we carry physical compasses on tracks that are remote with navigation components like the AAWT, but like a 2 or 3 gram compass is enough, you know, just a little mini one, because it's really just about, you know, going in the general direction, making sure you've got your correct bearings and that you're not heading off the wrong mountain ridge line or that type of thing. You know, if you were to carry, like, to meaningfully carry a bigger, more functional compass, you'd have to carry like more detailed physical maps, but then they just become too large and the scale of it is too difficult, you know? And at that point, you're better off just using your phone, you know, and having a redundant electronic system.
Okay.
Any more questions before we move on? All right.
Cool. So I guess the next question then is, you know, if we are so heavily advocating the use of a GPS, well, how do we use that? And so the primary method is using our phones. You know, they're by far the most powerful GPS unit that you can own. And so we're going to start by talking about an app called FarOut. So the FarOut is a excellent low effort option that costs $27 for this trail. And the benefit of it is that it comes with a preloaded route for the trail. And the cool thing about it is it has, you know, little waypoints and icons and information, and it generates elevation profiles for you and that type of thing. You can click on the waypoints and people can leave comments and they're time-stamped. So here, this blue line indicates a detour on the track. And so if I click here, someone said in 2024 that the bridge is still closed, but the alternate route is quite nice. You know, this can be really handy for water sources or campsites or that type of thing. And so it's a really good way to try get up-to-date information about the trail. You know, is this water tank dry, or is this creek still running? That type of thing. What are the trail conditions like? This in combination with the Facebook group is the best way to get live, you know, up-to-date commentary from people who are walking on the track, you know, and that's it's an invaluable resource. However, the big downside of FarOut is ultimately for the AAWT, it's incomplete. It doesn't have all of the information. The track isn't always correct, you know, so it's not something that you can blindly follow. On trails like the PCT in the US, you can genuinely download this app on your phone, you know, download the maps on it, and you can be pretty happy going off and hiking the trail. Because the AAWT is not as popular, it doesn't have as many comments, and the trail is not as accurate. So you're treating it more as one of your many sources of information, you know, combined with the Facebook group and that type of thing. Yeah. So it's a good resource, but you don't want to rely on it completely. So the next one that we're gonna talk about is Gaia GPS, which is
just quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry, that $27, is that like a one-off payment? Or so you just get, and then you've got the whole trail, and that's it. You have to pay again.
And there's also I think it's like $80 for the Australia New Zealand bundle that comes with all of the the Hyson Trail, the Bibbulmun Track, the Larapinta, and then all the stuff in New Zealand except for Te Araroa, and I think that's like $80 or something.
Okay.
And yeah, I guess like I said, in the US, you know, you could be pretty happy downloading this and off you go, you know, but in Australia, it's not as developed, and so it's more of it's an adjunct. It's a tool that you use to get, you know, some extra live information.
Cool.
So can I just ask, when you say it's inaccurate, so the actual it's following the trail doesn't follow the ground?
So with the Alpine track, the trail itself is kind of it's like a living thing, you know, and that sometimes some bits of the track are open, other times it's not open. Maybe a trail has just been re-cleared, you know, maybe it hasn't been cleared in like 5 years, and you're better off taking an alternate, you know. And so in a way, there's no way for a single like route to actually ever be fully accurate for the Alpine track because it's always changing. But what I mean specifically is that, you know, say, for example, where's a good example? You know, there are times when the track, it might take a route that maybe that was the way 3 years ago, but it's not the way anymore, you know? And so this is where you really need to combine it with things like the Chapman book, which even itself is already outdated because there've been route changes made since the book got posted, since the book was published. And there are changes listed on the book publishing website. So this is where you're kind of being a detective and you're combining different sources of information. And we'll talk about one of the most useful ones in a second. Any other questions about this one? Cool. All right. So we're going to move on to looking at Gaia GPS, which is an app that is probably the one that we use the most on our phones when we're navigating trails, when there isn't a fully established FarOut version. And so the thing that is good about Gaia GPS is that you can download multiple different layers or sets of imagery to your phone. So you can download a topo map, you can download a satellite map, and most importantly is the fact that you can add the Strava heat map to this platform. And so the Strava heat map, for those who don't know, is a collection of all of the routes that people in the world run and ride and hike, and then it's aggregated over everyone, and they produce a heat map that shows where people go most often. So for the moment here, I've got the running, hiking heat map set up on my phone. And what you can, I'll get up a good example. What it can do is it gives you really good information about what the track quality is. Because when the track is really good, the heat map is really well defined because everyone is walking in the same direction. So if you look here on this trail, you know, you'd be really confident that you could bomb down this trail and you're not really going to get lost. The heat map is really well defined. It's really obvious. You'd look at this and you'd go, yeah, I'd be confident walking that, you know, like in the dark or something. Okay. But say at this bit of the track, so this purple line here is where the Australian Alps Walking Track goes. You'd go, it's really well defined here, but at this junction where the fire road continues down here, but the AAWT goes up here, the heat map is not as strong. So, you know, not as many people do it, you know, it's not as well established. And if you look here, you can notice how the GPX file goes this way, but the heat map goes in a slightly different direction. So that's giving you a hint to say, you know, I'm going to need to be a little bit more switched on here. The track is not as well defined. There's not as much heat map and doesn't always align with the route that, you know, is stored in online, like in the online, on the online maps. So another example that's really important is, say, this section here, climbing up Mount McDonald. This is one of the toughest navigation sections of the Alpine track. And you can see that reflected by when you look in here, there is actually no heat map at all. And what that is saying is that there is no uniform way that people are passing through this area. So what that means is, you know, to not get too hung up on finding the exact route. You're like, I need to head in this general direction. You know, I want to make sure I'm going the right way, but I'm not going to be too hung up on, you know, finding a track or that type of thing. So the reason we really like Gaia GPS is because you can load this Strava heat map in and it gives you really good indications as to what the quality of the track is. And it can be really useful for when the way that people go in the real world is different to online maps, because they're not always the same, you know.
Do you have to download those heat maps, or can you use them live when you're on the trail without any reception?
Yeah, so you have to, you can download them beforehand. Yeah. And so, yeah, this is probably the most useful tool that you can have at your disposal when you're walking on the track, because you know, Chapman is a really good guide, but sometimes his voice is a little bit flat. And what that means is he doesn't provide the emotion of like how the trail feels. You know, he'll just say track climbs steeply for 7 kilometers through forested ridgeline, you know, but that might actually mean like there is no track, it's really hard, it's really steep, and expect this to take a really long time, you know. And by looking at the heat map and going, oh, there's no heat map there, or it's really vague, that's sending alarm bells in your mind and saying, oh, I might need to carry some more water, I really need to research this section, that type of thing.
Just a question: is the Strava heat map, is that another subscription to Strava?
Yeah, so I should have clarified. So Gaia, to be useful in this way, is quite expensive. The subscription is $90 per year. I'm not sure if there's a monthly subscription, but we will be putting up a blog post about how to import the Strava heat map into Gaia for free, because it's not naturally there. But that's something we'll be posting pretty soon. And there's already some information up online as well, so you can. Yeah.
Tom, sorry to clarify that. Is that the paid version of Strava to get the heat maps? So I just went on my unpaid version of Strava, and there's no heat maps anywhere.
Sorry, sorry for not being clear. So we are only in the Gaia app. We're in the Gaia web page and in the Gaia app on your phone. And the Strava heat map is something that you can use inside the Gaia app. And so you're paying for a Gaia subscription to use their app, but you're using the Strava heat map within Gaia. And the reason you use the Strava heat map within Gaia is because in Gaia, you can download the maps, whereas you can't in Strava. So, you know, Strava might be really good for planning stuff, but you want to be able to use this offline, and that's why you need to use Gaia. I mean, there are other apps that you can do it in, but I think Gaia is the simplest and the most useful. We'll be writing up documents that explain these steps in more detail. The purpose of this session is to give you like these broad conceptual ideas of what you want to be thinking about, and for you to start thinking about the tools that you want to use to help you navigate along the track. Cool. So yeah, I mentioned that there's the satellite imagery as well. That can also be really useful for helping to understand, you know, if the area is going to be really forested or if it's open, or helping you navigate in features. You know, sometimes the GPS isn't always super accurate if you're in a like a forested area or something like that. And so having the satellite imagery helps you know what type of terrain to expect to be in. And that's something that you'll just develop comfort with as you use it. Does anyone have any questions about Gaia quickly? Oh, would you download FarOut as well as Gaia? Yeah, exactly. The point of these is that unfortunately there is no single best solution. You know, that's all good, Glenn. There is no single best solution, and at the moment, the best solution is kind of amalgamating different sources of information. And that's why you're looking at the Facebook group, you're using FarOut and the comments on FarOut and their waypoints. You're looking at the Strava heat map. You know, you're using the notes from the Chapman guidebook. What these are all doing are helping you build a picture of what is the most accurate set of information to help me navigate this trail, you know, to help you estimate how long sections are going to take, how much water you're going to need to carry, you know, thinking about what campsite you might reach at the end of the day, that type of thing. Because all of these sources are imperfect, but you're trying to combine them all to get the best picture as possible. Cool. Did anyone have any other questions about Gaia? Cool.
Do you use any weather maps?
Any weather maps?
I can't say we have used them actually, but that's not to say that they're not useful.
Yeah, I think weather would be a whole, like, predicting weather's a whole other topic, and maybe it's something we can talk about in a future session. But generally, yeah, looking at forecasts, there are lots of people who like to think they can look at a synoptic chart and come up with a better result than what the forecast says. And I think most people probably can't do that. And so it's generally best to just look at like the forecast from the weather, you know. There are some apps that we can link to that are really good because what they do is, for example, the InReach weather, for those who don't know, without reception, you can use your InReach to get a weather forecast when you don't have mobile data. You can get either a 3-day basic forecast or you can get a week-long premium forecast. The premium forecast is pretty pointless because their models aren't that accurate after 3 days, so you just want the free basic one. But yeah, we certainly have used it. For example, on the Greater Patagonian Trail, there are some days where you're pushing up over high altitude mountain passes and you don't have reception, you haven't had reception for a week, and you're wanting to know if it's going to be, you know, if it's a good idea to push up over the pass tomorrow, you know, and in that instance, the inReach can be really useful. Having said that, on the Alpine track, you generally get reception, you know, every day or so. And so, you know, you can probably have already got a forecast on your phone if you wanted to. But that was a really good question.
What about fires, bushfires?
Yeah, great question. So I think when it comes to fires, the best way to stay up to date with that is to be checking the Facebook page and the local alerts in the parks. There's not really any way that you can be informed of this offline, I don't think. So it's just checking when you have reception, if you feel like it's a particularly dry area, just updating yourself on the conditions throughout the Alps track. But that's something you really can only do when you have reception.
And registering your intent, you know, telling your friends where you're going, that type of stuff. If you have an inReach, you can update your location live so people know where you are. And you know, like if there's a fire, say through the like a particular component of the Alpine track, you know, they're going to the relevant parks office and they're saying, who are all the people that have submitted trip intention forms, you know, and they're developing an understanding of how many people there are on the track. They know there'll be people who haven't done trip intention forms because there always are, and they'll go looking for you, you know.
Do you do the trip intention form whereabouts? So well, if I'm starting at Walhalla, is there a parks office there that I can do that, or do I have to do it as I go along? Or
well, there are like you can, yeah. So like someone said, the Vic Emergency app lists the fires, but that is not notifying people that you exist. You know, when you're registering your track, your AAWT intentions, that's something that you can do online. And okay. if you do the old Google, it'll pop up.
Thank you.
But that's a really good question.
I've only got 4 weeks to go, so I'm desperate.
Yeah, mostly like it's mostly with the fires. It's like once you've notified people that you're away and you check when you have reception, you can't really do anything else. And so it's like, well, it's out of your hands, you know?
And if you're going in 4 weeks, it's not bushfire season. So at least at the beginning, you should be.
You're more concerned about rain and being very cold.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. The last app that we're just going to touch on briefly is FarOut. It's only available on iPhone, and we're not going to dwell on it too long. The main thing we'll say about it is that we really like FarOut because we find it really useful when you're offline for doing things like making routes offline, finding distances between points along tracks offline, and generating elevation profiles. So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh, how far is it till that lunch spot, you know, or where I was planning to camp, you can really easily find out the exact distance and what the elevation gain and loss and what it looks like is going to be. But it's only available on iPhone. But it's just far more usable than FarOut and Gaia. So it's $7 for a lifetime purchase. It's not as fully featured, but it does those things particularly well. And so for us, it's just another tool that we use for doing particular things. Yeah.
Excellent. Any quick questions about FarOut?
So just to clarify, you use FarOut for the sharing of information or receiving information. You use Gaia GPS to bring all those different data sets together, and you use FarOut for its functionality.
Offline.
Yeah, that's right. FarOut is just really good at telling you when a big hill is about to come.
So maybe you don't want it.
There's no Android equivalent.
I think Locus Maps has similar functionality, but we're stuck in the iPhone, in the Apple ecosystem, unfortunately. So
right. my partner's name is Siri, and she won't let me have an iPhone.
That's fair enough.
All right. Any other questions? Alrighty. Great. So that is a quick overview of how we like to use our phones to navigate. There are lots of other ways you can navigate, like we mentioned earlier. You can use a handheld GPS device. Garmin has several models, including the ones that integrate the SOS and satellite texting functionality, which is really great. You can use paper maps. You know, the Chapman book is really great for that, or any other paper map that you can get. And the other thing we'll touch on really briefly is using your Garmin watch to navigate. So we won't talk about it too much here as it can get quite complicated, but essentially what you can do is you can take the GPX files that you've put into Gaia, for example, and load them onto your watch. And what you can set your watch to do is it can buzz anytime you go off trail. So you're walking along and, you know, as the AAWT does quite often, you're on a fire trail, but the AAWT turns off the fire trail and you miss the turn because you're just zoned out walking down this fire road.
And there's no signage.
And there's no signs.
And there's no track.
But the great thing about having the GPX file loaded onto your watch is you walk 50 meters, 100 meters past this turnoff, and your watch will buzz and it'll say, you're off trail. And then you'll be like, oh no. And then you get your phone out and you see, oh, that's right, I was meant to turn left back there. So it's just a really great way to quickly know if you're off the trail. And this is something we do quite a lot when we are, you know, trying to go really fast or set FKTs, as it can save a lot of time. You know, you don't have to get your phone out for all the little details. You just have to get it out for the big picture. So it's really great, but obviously, I'll get to the question in a second. It's really great, but obviously, you know, it's only as useful as your GPX file. So you really have to trust your GPX file to trust your watch. Same with these other apps. So yeah, it's a great system and it can be quite complicated, but it works really well for just letting you know when you've gone off trail.
Can I add to that quickly?
Yes, you may.
The other reason that we really like our watches is because in a way it's kind of safer than using your phone or than using other systems. Because it's on your wrist, it's really easy to just glance at it really quickly and go, oh, I'm at an intersection. Do I go left or right here? Am I still on the track? You know, it just helps you answer all those really basic questions really quickly that mean you're far less likely to make bigger mistakes that can really cost you. And because it's so quick and easy to look at, you know, you don't have to pull your phone out. You don't have to look at a GPS. You're not trying to find where you are on like a big map that's blowing in the breeze. It just tells you exactly where you are, and it tells you instantly if you're on the track or not and which way to go. So we find you're much less likely to, you know, like trip if you're trying to walk whilst looking at, whilst navigating or something like that.
It's also really great in the rain when getting your phone out. You know, it's really hard to use the touchscreen, and you can just look at your watch and know that you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just answer Glenn's question.
Yeah. So with the models, our recommendation would be to match the watch to your wrist size. So for a guy, I have a relatively small wrist, and so I use the 965, the Forerunner 965. Whereas if you were a bigger guy, you could, do I use the 955? The one with the older screen.
I think you use the 955.
Yeah, the 955. If you have a bigger wrist, you know, one of the bigger Phoenixes with a bigger battery life could be good and a bigger screen. Maddie has one that's even smaller than mine because her wrist is smaller.
I have the Phoenix 7F.
Yeah.
And I really like it, but the battery life isn't as good. There's trade-offs for all of them.
Yeah. But if it's not comfortable to wear, then you won't enjoy wearing it. The other little secret is you can take off the normal Garmin band and put a little nylon band on, and it saves a lot of weight on your wrist and it dries a lot faster, and so it's much more comfortable to wear all day outside. That's just a little thing. Where to buy it? Okay, well, we don't need to talk about that. Cool. This watch thing is a whole like big thing. And if it's something you're really interested in, you can message us afterwards to try like sort it out. And it's something we'll be writing a more detailed guide on how to do really soon.
Any other questions?
Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Just sorry,
Yeah.
you seem pretty sold on the whole watch thing. I've never used the GPS watch, but like 9 out of 10 recommend it, or 7 out of 10? Like, what's your...
For the Australian Alps Walking Track, you know, like we would recommend it. For the Pacific Crest Trail, that's just like perfect single track the whole way, we wouldn't use it. It's not worth the effort of loading GPX files on. It's not worth the effort of keeping it charged. You know, another thing to buy, another thing to maintain. You know, but on the Alpine track, you know, and I'm not saying that everyone's trying to set a speed record, but for my friend Paul and I, when we did it in under 11 days, these watches were like super critical to our success, you know.
So it could save you like 6 hours going the wrong direction or something.
Yeah, like we made like 2 nav mistakes on the whole trail, sleeping 4 hours a night. And like we were walking in the dark, like all of these tough sections that we're about to talk about, a lot of them we did in the dark with basically no sleep. And it was because we could just look down at this and it would say, yes, you're on the right path, or it would tell us if you've just walked off the track.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we definitely recommend it, but it is a significant investment,
Yeah,
obviously.
like you can do it without it. Most people won't use a watch, you know. It's just if you're solo, you'd like some extra nav assistance, you know, you're less likely to break your phone because you're using your watch. It's actually more battery efficient because your watch screen uses much less battery than your phone. You know, like there are other advantages too, but it's like I wouldn't get really stressed about not having it. It's just if you feel like you'd really like that extra support.
Which Garmin watches are good and which are not?
I think there are a few in the chat there, and that's something that we can talk specifically about at the end if you'd like, just so that we can keep moving forward. But we like the Phoenix series and the Forerunner 955 are the ones that we have. Cool.
Yep.
All right. So what we're gonna do now is we're just going to run through some of the sections where you really want to be switched on with your navigation and just talk a little bit about some of the tips and tricks for each section. And this is something that is like, I feel like some of these sections, they can get like they get a reputation, you know, and sometimes it's deserved, sometimes it's not. And a lot of the time, they're really easy things that you can do to stay on the track. Most of these are in the southern third, so from Mount Hotham down. All right, so the first one that we're going to talk about is Black River, which I remember is down here. So Black River is you'll come across it in your planning. It's in the southern third. And the really important thing to know about the Black River crossing is that there is a track the whole way. It is just really easy to lose. Most oftentimes, if you're going northbound, you're coming down this fire trail, and this little left-hand turn is quite easy to miss, and there is a log footbridge. So when I first did this track, there was not a footbridge in place, and it was a real mess around because the banks are really steep and it's really hard to find places to cross the river. But there's a log footbridge there now, and you really need to make sure you find it. Like you really don't want to cross at any other point because you're just going to end up in blackberries and you're going to like get all scratched up and like it's just going to be a sad time. So you really want to make sure that you find this crossing, and it looks to me like this has been updated because it's at this campsite you hook a left instead of most people follow this track down to the river, and then that's where they get caught out. this track coming up north, the other side, has been maintained recently. So like it's a little bit overgrown, but it exists. You know, like you're not really going to get lost on it. The clutch is really the crossing and finding the bridge. All right. We've got a few of these, so I'm just going to move through them. And if you have any specific questions, we can always talk about them at the end. Yeah, that's right. And that's like that person's in the comments. If you reach the river, you've gone too far because you need to take this left-hand turn. All right. So the next one is talking about climbing up Mount McDonald and going across to High Cone. So this section here, so just so you guys know, I have the Strava heat map loaded right now. So the fact that we're not seeing really any heat map is saying not a lot of people go through here. You know, these are fire roads, so the lack of heat map is because there just aren't many people going through here. But when you're seeing no heat map on a hiking trail, that's alarm bells going off in your brain, you know. And this is a section where, yeah, there is a track. It's a canned route, but you know, it's really easy to lose it. And my advice for this section is that you just want to keep an eye on your watch or on your GPS just to make sure that, you know, you're still heading up the spur line, you're still going the right direction. But if you're like 20 meters either side of the track, you know, there's no point like spending hours looking for a track that does exist, or it might exist for like 20 meters and then disappear again. You know, your best bet is to just keep heading up the ridgeline looking for cans. And for those who don't know, cans are piles of rocks that people put up. You know, there might be some pink tape, but your general, like your vibe is that you're climbing up the mountain, up the ridgeline, and like anytime you see a marker, that's like an added bonus. Cool. All right, the heading up from Mount McDonald here, the really important thing is to make sure that you don't accidentally go off the wrong spur. You know, if there's really thick fog in this area, it can be really tricky. And, you know, you're basically just following a ridgeline the whole way, but you don't want to descend off onto a different ridgeline. And this is why we really advocate for GPS technology, because, you know, if you get whiteout conditions up here, like a map is really not that useful, or most people are not, like very few people would have the skills in a whiteout to be up here with a map and compass, you know? So of course the better answer is to not be up here in a whiteout, but it's like if you're camped, you know, if you're camped in like one of the campsites up here and, you know, these conditions roll in, it's like, you know, you're kind of dealt with these cards, you know, and you just have to deal with it. So these are areas where the GPS is really useful. And, you know, here we can see we're walking along a ridge line, but there's no heat map. So that says, you know, okay, my focus is walking along the ridge line. I'm not expecting there to be an amazing track. If I see some like piles of rocks, that's really great, but I'm not going to waste too much time trying to find a really clear track. You're better off just trying to find the path of least resistance, and chances are you'll hop on it for a while, you'll hop off it, and then you'll hop back on, and then eventually, you know, like here, we can see this dotted line turns onto a fire trail here. You know, so this is like your marker. You're like, if you're coming this way, you're going, I'm heading down this ridge line, and I'm really just trying to hit this fire trail. But you're not worried about if you're coming down here or if you're coming down here, you know, you're just trying to take the path of least resistance. The Chapman book is really good in this regard because it has in really good detail which sections are faint tracks and which sections are, you know, established tracks. So combining that with the heat map gives you a really good set of information as to what to expect. Yeah, so the next one is coming across into the Viking wilderness through Viking Saddle. So this is probably one of the most notorious bits of the of the whole AAWT. It's one of the most scenic, the crosscut saw through here. And if you look, you see that there are a lot of contours. So it's really steep here. And the really good thing about the Viking in the last couple years is that a bunch of running races have gone through there. And so the parks have made really good effort to clear the track. And so it's in a much better state than it used to be. And so what you need to know about crossing the Viking wilderness, say from Catherine's Saddle through to the Barry Saddle water tank, this Viking section, is that there is a track. You know, if you're hit by an impenetrable wall of scrub, it means that you've gone the wrong way. You've maybe taken a little footpad that's misled you off the track. And so our advice here is to, if you're in that situation, go back to the last trail marker that you saw and, try again to find the next marker. You're really going like marker to marker because there are markers here. There's tape, the track has been cleared to an extent. And so, the mistake that you can make here is getting in too deep, a sunk cost fallacy. Oh, I've been going this way, and, maybe it's been getting slower and slower and slower and slower. And that's just because it was an old track, or it's like an animal track or something like that. There is a path through here and you can follow it. It just takes time. Like Paul and I on the FKT, we got caught doing this in the dark or at like 3 a.m. with really thick fog that was rolling in. And we just knew we were wasting time. So we ended up just sleeping on the ground somewhere and waiting for the sun to come up. And then when the sun came up, it was like, whoa, different world. So, yeah, this area has it's not a bad reputation. It has a famous reputation, but I think that it's been tempered down a bit by the recent maintenance, which is really good. All right. From here, I mean, the next section that I'm going to point out is a fair bit further north. So we're kind of out of that southern third bit now. Where is it? Is this Omeo? Yeah. So the next bit I want to talk about is Mount Wills, which is, if you're going northbound, it's just before the Omeo Highway. And now it's not a particularly difficult section, but it's just surprising because before it, there's a really good track, and after it, there's a really good track. And so again, this is an area where the heat map is really useful because this is Mount Wills Hut, and this is a fire road coming up, and you see there's a really well-defined heat map. And then from the hut coming south down this direction, you see the heat map is good till this lookout, but after this lookout, it gets much fainter and patchy. And that's, you're looking at this and you're going, okay, that's alarm bells. I need to be switched on here. Easy for me to lose the track. And so there is a track through here, but it's on and off. And this is an area where it's really great to just have, your watch on, or you're just looking at your GPS and you're going, yeah, I'm pretty close to the route here and I'm going the right way generally, but you're not too stressed about being on the exact track because, I'm pretty sure the exact track through here changes every week, So, you can see here, this bit's really faint, but through here it firms up a bit, so this bit is better. And this descent is actually a little bit better than wandering through here. So this is where the heat map's really good, because we can see there is a route that people are following, but they're not super convinced by it. So it's a really good indicator to just be careful. The good thing though is that the area is quite open. So you're not it's not super slow walking. You're just kind of walking through lightly forested areas, and it's actually a really beautiful spot on the track. Cool. All right, the next spot is descending from Johnny's Top, which is here. So we can see the heat map is pretty good coming up to, this is the trig of Johnny's Top. But then once we start heading down to descend in down to Buenba Creek, we see that the heat map, it really disappears. And this is another area where it's not too thick. So you really are just trying to go in the general direction. You'll be on the track, you'll be off the track. You know, you're better off just going down and really making sure that, you know, you cross this creek here and head into this valley. But even here, you see, once you get into the valley, the situation's even worse. The fire regrowth through here is really thick, or at least when I was last there in 2022. And this is just kind of walking through like a boggy valley for, I don't know, like 5Ks or something. And again, you don't like, you don't need to get too caught up in being on the track, because like you can see from the heat map, you know, oh, maybe you should go around here instead of the official, you know, route there or whatever. But I don't think you need to get too caught up on it. Like when you're here, you're like, my main focus is to get through this steep bit here. You can see the valley tightens and you're just trying to get from there to there. So really there's not like, there's an on and off track all the way till Buenba Flat campsite. And then you see the heat map picks up again. So you're like, oh, okay, you know, I really just need to get here, and then the track will be more obvious. Cool. And then similarly, after Buckwong Hut here, it's the same situation, fire trail, good heat map. And then it's like, bam, there's nothing. The track disappears, there's no heat map. And so this area, a lot of people walk this fire trail around at the moment. In 2022, there was basically no track here. And I mean, this is really just when
Sorry, can you tell me where you are right now?
At Buckwong Hut.
Thanks.
These are all listed in our track guide on our website as well, like the different points. We don't talk about it in as much detail, but yeah, so Buckwong Hut, you know, a lot of people take this fire trail around. And I mean, I had to do this for the FKT because you have to do the official route, but I mean, I would probably do this. I guess it depends how much of a purist you are. It's up to you. All right, from there, the next bit that we're going to talk about is really exciting. Up on the main range in Kosciuszko National Park, I'm sure some of you have done it, the rolling grounds. It's beautiful. And so you're coming off the main range walk here onto the rolling grounds, and you can see here there's a really good, well-defined route. Really, really nice. Oh, it's a little bit iffy here, but it picks up again. But the further along you go, once you get past Concert Stephens Pass, you can see that, you know, it's much more of a find your own way. And there is a general correct direction, but you're not, it's like you're going to follow cans for a little while and then they'll disappear and then they'll come back again. And then you'll be on a footpad and then there'll be nothing and then it'll come back. And really the most important thing about the rolling grounds here is that you really want to nail the descent into Whites River Hut. The gully tightens here and it goes from being a lightly, like goes from being open tussock into quite thick, like waist height or chest height tussock in along the river. And you really need to make sure that you can see where the heat map like solidifies here. You really want to make sure you find this trail down to Whites River Hut, because if you come down in this valley, you're going to have a really bad time. But you can see there's not an amazing track beforehand. So in your head, you're like, okay, I'm navigating through the rolling grounds, but then I'm really making sure that I hit where I'm hitting this bit here to hit this side of the river to come into White's Hut. And so hopefully what you guys are getting a sense of now is why the heat map is so useful on a track where the quality of the trail is so varied. Because in Chapman, this is just all listed as off track. You know, it doesn't say like this bit of off track is less off track than the other bits, you know? So that's why you really need to be combining all these different sources of data. We're nearly there. The last tricky bit is where is it?
Yeah, no.
Here. Yeah, the last bit is north of the Murrumbidgee River. And here you can see, you know, nice heat map coming in. You cross the river at this ford. That's a really good spot because it's nice and shallow. But then from here, you know, the heat map is split. Do you go up next to the river or do you go up this spur? They're both fine. But then from here, you're in this open tussock plain, and you know, you don't need to worry too much about the exact track. You know, you could go this way, you could go that way. It doesn't really matter. You know, it's all just open ground that you're better off just walking instead of wasting your time. This track does exist once you hit here. So you could like come here and then cut up here, and then this track exists and you can follow it mostly through to Miller's Hut. But the official AAWT heads up here past some power lines. But this is a classic example of where the heat map's useful because you can see from this river crossing, the online map goes this way, but everyone seems to go this way. So, you know, you might be looking like FarOut would tell you to go this way, you know, but you'd look at the heat map and you'd decide to go this way instead till you hit this track. So, here it doesn't actually really matter anyway because it's all quite open. Like it's just going to cost you, I don't know, like 15 or 30 minutes, but it, you know, it's just helping you develop your skills and competency so that when you're in tougher areas, you know, you've just got that extra experience in using these tools. So those are the tricky nav areas that we wanted to highlight. But the summary is that if you're in a thickly forested area and you're having trouble finding the track, it generally means that you've wandered off the track. Like when the bush is really thick, there is a track. You just need to work hard to find it. If you're on a ridge line or in an open plain and you're having trouble finding the track, it's probably because there isn't really one. And that will be reflected in the heat map, and you're better off just moving along. And yeah, the Chapman notes are good, but again, it's just like it's another data source.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions about that before we head into water carrying stuff quickly?
Yeah, just quickly on the rolling plains one, if you're going southbound, I assume like going into that is like quite straightforward, but then like finding the track again, is that dodgy? Like, the other ones I could sort of work it out. But
so yeah, coming from White's River Hut, it's pretty straightforward to find the trail up onto the rolling grounds. You just have to backtrack from the hut a little bit. And then, yeah, there's not really much of a track through the middle, or it's on and off. In terms of finding where it solidifies again, it's actually not too bad, because the track itself, you know, all these different routes that you could take that people have done, they all link up. And so from our experience, it's not too bad. It's not too bad navigating going south.
cool. Thanks.
Like Maddie said, yeah, it's just about backtracking from White's to head up the spur, rather than if you head straight up from White's, you're just in the valley and it's sufferfest.
Yeah. But yeah, the great thing about going south is that, yeah, you have this little trail up onto the rolling grounds, and then it's vague for maybe 5 or 6 Ks, and then it solidifies and you can follow it almost the whole way, pretty much the whole way to the main range loop. And then it's a tourist walk. So yeah, it's really easy to navigate. Well, I'm not going to say really easy, sorry, but it's easier to navigate going south.
Okay, thanks.
Preference for direction for the whole trail. The the hardest bit is the southern third. And so the preference for direction, it's kind of like a personal psychology thing. Like, do you want to get the hardest bit done first, or do you want to build up to it at the end? Like, to give you the best chance of finishing, probably going southbound makes sense, because that's going to give you more time to get fitter and get your trail legs, practice your nav, all that type of stuff. But if you're like us and you live in Canberra, like, there's only one way to go, and that's northbound.
The other great reason to go northbound is that you get all the hard stuff done, and then you're rewarded at the end with easier walking.
And you get bragging rights over southbounders.
So there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
Any other questions about navigation? We will have time to come back at the end as well and answer any more questions that people have.
Is there any with navigation, if you're doing southbound, what do you do when the book is all designed for northbound?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
You flip it upside down.
Chapman actually does it's obviously written going northbound, but they do highlight certain areas where you need to be careful with navigation going southbound. So there might be a sentence or two in the text that you kind of need to dig around and find, where it says, if you're going southbound, watch out for this, or aim for this point. But otherwise,
it's where the heat map is really good.
Yeah.
Because the heat map goes both ways.
Yeah, but the Chapman book does have some useful information for southbounders as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but it's kind of buried in the text, so it's more designed for northbound hikers.
Cool. All right.
All right. Now we'll move on to water management.
Which is a shorter topic.
It is a shorter topic. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, water is not always easily obtained on the AAWT, especially in summer. So there can be some really long sections of hiking where there's no reliable water sources. It can be up to 1 to 2 days of walking, depending on how fast you walk or how far you walk in a day. And in these drier sections, the way you're going to get water is by detouring off the track. And the other really important thing to do is, if you're putting food drops in, you should almost always put water in these food drops, more than you think you'll need, because you could just, like, maybe a water source has dried up and you know that you've got a food drop coming in 10 kilometers. It's nice knowing that you have 100% reliable water source waiting for you at your food drop. So that's really important. We would highly recommend putting in several liters of water into your food drops. So that's kind of an overview of water. In terms of what we do, on the AAWT, we generally like to carry around 4 liters each in Victoria, and that is because there are longer stretches between water sources. In New South Wales, we generally find that 2 liters is enough. But having said that, we are generally fast walkers, and we're quite happy to commit to camping at places where there is a reliable water source. So we know that, we're happy to walk into the dark to reach the campsite that has water. And, that's not everyone, and that's totally fine. So if you know that you don't want to camp where there's water, maybe you want to camp in a really nice spot that doesn't have reliable water nearby, or you walk a little bit slower, or you just drink a lot more water than the average person, maybe a 5 to 6 litre capacity is better for you in Victoria. It's really a personal preference, but we tend to go with 4 litres.
The biggest point that we want to make about water is that carrying more water doesn't always make you safer. It's really understandable that people get really scared and worried about running out of water. It's something that we obviously have to take really seriously, but we also need to consider the steps that we take reasonably. Because what you need to remember is that every liter of water that you carry is an extra kilo on your back. This means that you're fatiguing faster, so you're more likely to have a fall, you're more likely to injure yourself, overwork your muscles, and in general, everything is just harder. And so this doesn't mean that we don't carry extra water to be safe, but we're being smart about how much extra water we're carrying. For us, like, we think that for the vast majority of hikers, it would be very, very rare it to be a good idea to carry more than 6 liters. Like, if you're carrying a really heavy pack, it's asking for trouble, just as much as running out of water is. So, like, what we're asking you to do is to take a broad risk management perspective and consider that carrying extra water also increases your risk of other problems. So, you all the time you run into someone who's carrying like 10 liters of water, and you can understand why, but it's really it's actually less safe. And so that's why we'd encourage you to really be sensible and make smart decisions. And that's where understanding the track, doing your research, all of that type of stuff helps you make more informed decisions. Specifically, the Chapman guidebook is good for this because they have estimates for how long different sections take. His estimates are really geared towards people that are carrying really heavy packs, like 20 plus kilos. And so what that means is that, if you're carrying a lighter pack, you're probably faster on the uphills and downhills, and it's probably, quite similar on the flats. That's been our experience. The other thing, touching on the question that Claire asked about filtration, we can go through our filter setup in more detail in the gear session, but what we will point out is that in some areas of the AAWT, particularly the southern third, there are areas where you're going to be relying quite heavily on water tanks, particularly in the dry barries. In the barries, it used to be a problem that there wasn't any water. Now the problem is that you might get to the water and there's like a dead rat in it or something. And so what you really want to do is make sure that you have a system where you can be confident that you can clean that water. And so for us, what that means is we pre-filter it with a buff, so hopefully there aren't dead rats. But the point is that if you get to a water tank and it's 10 hours that way and 10 hours that way to the next one, like, you're drinking out of it, so you want to be prepared. So what we do is we pre-filter with a buff. So, put a buff over the tap, turn the tap on, and it filters into your bottle, and that just get rid of all the really big stuff. Then we run it through our filter, and then we'll finally pop a water purification tablet in it. That's not something we do normally. Like, most of the time we'll do like either water filter or purification tablet, depending on like our circumstance. But it's just really nice to know that if you come across a water tank that you don't like the look of, that you can clean it. SteriPens are an option. They're heavy and they require charging. So for us, we tend to we are more in like the ultralight space, and the SteriPen is not like, it doesn't really like earn its like place in that area. Cool. So any other questions about that quickly? Sweet. All right. So the last thing that we're going to go through is just highlight, the Sawyer works well. There's a Catadyne, Platypus. I don't know. There's heaps of really good filters out now. Yeah. Cool. So we're going to go through some of the longest water carries, and the biggest thing to remember with the water carries is that it's not about distance, it's not about elevation, it's about how long it's going to take you to walk it and at what time of day you're going to be walking that section. And so all of these sections, the reason why they why you're likely to get caught out is because the distances are, moderately high, but the track is really slow and it can be really hard to find water if you suddenly are like, oh, I brought 3 liters and I really needed 4, So the first one is, I'm going to go all the way back to the start. It's pretty quick hiking the AAWT on a map. So the first one is coming up over the Ball Plateau. It's around 24 kilometers, and there is water up there, but the word plateau, it's like you're not passing big rivers or anything like that. And so if you are planning on camping up there, if you're going to look for water, if there's been lots of rain recently, it'll be reasonably easy to find. But if it hasn't, you've got to be ready to work quite hard to find that water. And when you do, it might take you a long time to fill up, and it might be, it might be yucky. You might be getting your buff out. So I guess with all of these longer carries, this is where you can be really strategic about planning your days, about where you camp, so that you can, try do these long sections in a day. Or if you're really gunning it, as you're planning to do it as part of a day, but you cover the whole thing. So with this water carry, coming up from Mount Erica Car Park, you go up over the Ball Plateau, and then you bomb down this massive descent. And it's only once you get all the way down to this river here that you've got another water supply, and you might actually have to walk all the way along this road down here to get to the river, because this can be, a little bit shitty or private. Oh, no, I don't think it's private property, but it can be annoying to get to. So that one's near the start of the track. So that's why, you can get caught out on it. The next one is climbing out of Black River. And again, these are all listed in our track guide, but we're just talking a bit more about them. Coming out of Black River, you can say hello to the leeches as you fill up your water there. And then you get to do this big climb up here, and it's 20 kilometers from Big River to Low Saddle, which Low Saddle is all the way down here. And it's a really hard 20 kilometers, for anyone, that's a big day, that 20 Ks. So what a lot of people do is they put a food drop in near Rump Saddle. Or what you can also do is, instead of following the track up here, you can follow this road instead. And quite oftentimes there'll be streams running down through here, which you can fill up at. But if you're set on doing the official AAWT, you can't use that. And so this 20 Ks from Black River to Low Saddle, it's not an area where you can easily detour to get water apart from this road. And if you don't have a food drop, there are options, but it's not easy. You're better off just carrying the water, unless you're camping at one of those spots. Once you get to Low Saddle, this is a tricky point because there can be water easily accessible here, but oftentimes you have to follow this road down. And depending on how dry it is, it'll change how far you have to go down. Hopefully you only have to go down to here, but you might have to come down to here or even here. And so this Low Saddle here is probably one of the really clutch water supplies in this region and of the whole trail. There is also apparently another source down here that they talk about in the Chapman book, but it's off track and a bit of a mess around. Whereas I think most people would prefer to just bomb down a fire trail, where you're not looking for it. You're not wondering if you found it. You just keep going until you see water. So yeah, that's a really big, long 20 Ks. And that's where you're thinking about, okay, maybe I want to be finishing my day at Low Saddle. There aren't heaps of camp spots, but it's fine. You can make it work. Because the next long carry is from Low Saddle. So that's why it's such a clutch point, because from here, you're climbing up on Mount McDonald. And, this is a spot we talked about. The nav is really slow and tricky. and there's no reliable water source on the track all the way until you get to Chester's Yard up here. And that's 16 Ks, but it's probably one of the slowest 16 Ks of the whole track. So again, that's like where you're thinking, you know, a good day is low saddle to Chester's Yard. There are points where you can like detour off the track and get water, but again, it's like, it's a lot of effort. And it depends on the time of year, you know. If you're here late in the season, it's like Chester's Yard and low saddle, like those are your options. So that's where, you know, doing your research is really good. And then the next one is from Chester's Yard. It's 12 kilometers. So you might go, oh, that's not as far, but it's across the crosscut saw, which is steep and slow. And so from here, from Chester's Yard, you're following up north along the crosscut saw. And then the next reliable water is down here in Catherine Saddle, or Camp Creek, sorry. And you've got the Camp Creek here. This is another really important water source. You can get water by going down to what's this hut again? How do I pronounce that? Vallejo Gantner hut. Like you can get water down there, but it's a long way to go just to get water. That would more be a place to camp and get water. This, like, as you can see, this whole section here, water is really problematic, and that's what makes it really tough, because you're kind of committing to like leapfrogging sections. And then from there, it's kind of the last like tricky one, because the next reliable water source on the track is over at Barry Saddle. Like that person said, like Nick said, from Mount Mac, you can head down Mount Sunday Road, but it's like, how long is that compared to going down to Low Saddle? You know, it just depends how desperate you are. From Mount Speculation up over to Barry Saddle campsite, where this water tank is, you can find water at Viking Saddle. You can see this little track here that goes down. There's also, you know, you're really inspired by that heat map. You look at that and you go, yeah, there's definitely water there. So you can generally find water there, and you might just have to go further down. There's also, you know, you can also head down the other direction. See, they were desperate. You know, they couldn't wait till they got to Low Saddle. So from Mount Speculation all the way through to the Barry's hut, Barry's water tank, the first tank there, that is another big push, because coming up here, like we talked about, through the Razor Viking Wilderness, it's really slow. And so again, that's where you're thinking about like really planning your days around your water carries, and looking at the Chapman book about how long these are expected to take, because, you know, it can be 1K an hour. And so if it's 10 Ks, you're like, well, that's a day. So just being really smart. From here further north, there've been a lot of water tanks put in, and so the situation is not as tough, and the tracks are generally faster. So and so this is where using FarOut and Facebook is really good, because there are water tanks in this section that you're going to be kind of, you know, relying on and looking at. That's where, you know, going onto Facebook and seeing if anyone said about the tank levels, that's really good information. All right, so the next one that we're going to point out is actually all the way up on the main range. So from Dead Horse Gap to White's River Hut, if you're up there and, you know, there's no snow or anything, I mean, like, there is water up there, but you're going to have to do a detour, and it's not always super easy. This is one of those situations, if it's rained recently, you'll be able to detour to find water easily. If it hasn't rained a lot, you're planning, you're like, okay, my next water is at White's. And it's 21 Ks, and it's not as slow as the southern third in Victoria, but there is this off-track section through the rolling grounds like we were talking about. It's just, you just want to be prepared because there's lots of water south of it and there's lots of water north of it. So your brain, like your water brain, you might be like, oh, I'm out of Victoria, and you just switch off. But this is one of those areas where you need to be careful. The one other spot in New South Wales that we're highlighting is around Tabletop Mountain, because this is also really dry. It's like an 11K carry from 9 Mile Creek, which I think is this one here, down to like Barney's Creek, or like one of the water sources down here. And this, it's not a long carry, it's not a hard carry. It's just that on either side of it, you're used to seeing water like every 1 or 2 kilometers. And if you start this section with no water and then it's like 11 Ks, you can get caught out. So it's just about being smart in this spot. Whew. A quick 30 minutes, hey? Awesome.
So
that.
Yeah, so I guess now we're opening the floor to questions, whether it's on water-specific stuff or general questions. We've just got a question from Sam. How did you keep track of when you needed to camel up? Are you asking how we knew when we needed to carry water, like a lot of water? If that's the question, then
Yeah, like
we kept a close eye on our phone, or we looked at the day ahead, and we knew that once we hit a certain point, we would have to collect water and think about it. Yeah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, cameling up, for people who don't know, is when you just like scull a whole bunch of water, so you don't have to carry as much to the next water supply. For us, we don't actually believe in cameling up, because if you drink a whole bunch of water, your body absorbs a little bit of it and then you just piss the rest out. So it's like a false sense of security. But in terms of these long water carries, luckily you guys have a track guide on a certain website that lists all of these carries. So we did it the hard way and you guys get to do it the easy way. So
yeah, but like Sam has said in the comments, waypoints is a really great way to do this. On Gaia, in Gaia, you can have your GPX file, and you can also input waypoints outlining when the start of the water carry is and when the finish is. And that's a really great way for you to just quickly glance at your phone and know that there's a big water carry coming up, rather than having to remember the exact names of the places that have the long water carries. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you have a favorite water purifying drop or tablet?
Yeah, there's the really good ones are the Catadyne MicroPur ones, the chlorine they're slightly different. Like the cheap ones are Aquatabs, and that's what we use most of the time, because when you're buying like 600 liters of purification tablets for like a 4,000 K hike and you can't resupply, we just buy the cheap ones. But if you want the ones that taste the best, it's the Catadyne MicroPur ones. They're definitely the best tasting in that they don't taste. Cool. Any other? Yeah.
From your experience, do you find that you often end up camping where you had set out from your planning, or do you kind of just take impromptu campsites as the days kind of settle down and you end up setting up where you set up, or do you find that you've been pretty accurate?
That's a really good question. So I guess the style of hiking we generally do is we like to have an idea of what the track is going to be like for the first few days and have some idea of where we're going to be camping, but we don't try to plan a day-by-day schedule. And the reason we don't do that is because
It doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It's so easy to fall behind schedule or to get there too early and want to push on. And it really creates a sense of pressure, and it can make you have really bad decisions. You know, you think that because your schedule says you need to camp at a certain point, you have to get there. And that's a really dangerous way of thinking, because the trail could be a lot slower than you think, the weather could be bad. There are so many things that can slow you down. And we think it's really limiting to plan a day-by-day schedule. But that being said, it's still really important to know what's ahead. So what we really like to do is have an understanding of what the trail is going to be like for the next few days. And then we wake up in the morning, you know, we make sure we have enough water for the section we're about to do. We walk and walk and walk. We take breaks when we want. And then when it comes a time where we feel like we stop walking or we see a really nice campsite, we just stop and take it. We don't try to plan any more than that.
Yeah, it's really like the two things that dictate your camp, or the three things that dictate your camping, are how much water you have, how much food you have, and whether there's space for you to camp. And so on the Alpine track, there are bits where you'll be walking along a ridge line for 10 Ks and there is nowhere to set up a tent, you know? So you need to take into account the realities of, you know, food, water, and space to camp. But beyond that, we would recommend as few constraints as possible. Because like Maddie says, it impacts your decision making and your fun levels.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
How do you manage your phone and your tracking devices to preserve the battery?
Yeah, good question. So I guess for our phones, the really simple thing you can do is put on battery saver, airplane mode, all of that stuff. And we really try to only use our phones when we need to. So we use them for navigation, we use them for taking photos, maybe for checking the Facebook page or the bushfire risk or whatever for the area when we have reception, or the weather. But other than that, we won't use our phone. So we won't use it to, say, read a book in the evening or anything like that. We really dedicate it only towards navigation, photos, and when we have service, getting some more up-to-date information.
And listening to music.
And listening to music. And
through like AirPods or something.
Yeah. And the other thing we do is, we said before that we carry two phones because there are two of us. The second phone is always turned off. And so we only have one phone turned on at any given time. And our other phone, it's just dead weight until we turn it on if we need it. So that one's always turned off.
Will you track yourself on Gaia?
No, we won't. That uses a lot of battery. We just use, but you know, that being said, that's a personal preference. If you want to track yourself, then go for it. We track ourselves on our watches.
But only only for speed records, for verification purposes. On normal hikes, we don't really track anything. It's just when you turn your phone on to look at the map on Gaia, that's when it'll lock the signal. Whereas if you're recording, it'll drain the battery way faster. If you do want to record something, that's when a watch is really good, because it's independent of your phone. And so you're like protecting your phone. You're not exposing it to that risk of like accidentally wiping your battery in like a day because you left the tracking on overnight or something, you know?
Yeah, the other really useful way you can track yourself is using the inReach, and that's a great way to keep your family members up to date with where you're at. But the important thing to know when you're using the inReach tracking is that you need to have the settings so that the screen turns off in between the times where it pings the satellite to update your location. Because the screen, if it stays on the whole time, will drain the battery really quickly. But if it turns off and only turns on every 30 minutes when it updates your location, that saves a lot of battery.
Thank you.
I just got a question. You mentioned collecting water and food drops. What's your target pack weight that you would ideally carry between on a 10, 15K day?
Let's say 5K base weight, 5 kilo base weight, 900 grams of food a day. So let's say it's a 5-day food carry. So that's like 4.5 kilos, and then let's say it's a 2 liter carry, so that's 11.5 kilos.
Okay.
Yeah, like if you're carrying more than, yeah, like with a 5 kilo base weight, which is really achievable, and like to be comfortable, yeah, like most of the time your packs will be under 10 kilos. It'll just be at the start of those really long resupplies, and if you're carrying like 4 liters or something. But I mean, you're looking at max 15 in that case, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we'll talk a lot more about what gear we take in another session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, that's a really tough question. There are so many great
Yeah,
parts of the
which section would
AWT.
you do over a week?
Yeah.
Have you done any of it?
No, I haven't done any of it except the main range we track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And what's your like I guess like what's your hiking level? What's your hiking level of experience?
Medium, sort of do 4 to 5 day hut hikes, usually like great walks in New Zealand type stuff.
Yeah, okay. I would say the Bogong High Plains are really spectacular. The crosscut saw is a obvious candidate. The problem with the crosscut saw is doing it as a loop or arranging transport options. But I think the big question for you is if you can facilitate a car shuffle or if you're comfortable hitchhiking or not, because that will really dictate whether you're going to do a loop or whether you're going to do like a point to point.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Just one more thing. How many food drops do the people who do it normally who want to take a month and a half, how many food drops would that involve? 5 or 4?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends how much time you have to put these food drops in. So, from our experience, it's almost always better to put more food drops in than less. But the downside with that is that it takes a lot of time. You have to, drive out and put them there, but then you also have to go collect them when you're done. And that's a lot of driving. But the upside is that you have a much lighter pack because you can resupply every 4 or 5 days. So it's really up to how much time you have to prepare. We list on our track guide on our website some of the really popular resupply options, places to put drop boxes in. And I mean, if you can put one in all of them, like I don't really see why you wouldn't, because it's just going to make your life easier, at least while you're walking the trail.
The flip side is that if you're a stronger walker and like the big limitation for you doing this track is that, you're interstate doing food drops is really annoying, hard, logistically challenging to do, then you can do this track without food drops. We definitely recommend going southbound and you'd want to have a light pack and be on the stronger end of walkers, but it is totally feasible like and realistic to do this without food drops as long as you're comfortable hitchhiking.
Also,
why
I just did
southbound?
mine.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask.
Touch on the why southbound quickly. I think I heard why would we go southbound for that.
Yeah.
The reason for that is because the northern third of the AWT is the easiest. So you can really get your walking legs and you can, just have a really strong start.
The longest food carry, if you're not doing food drops, is in the southern third. Like it's the longest and hardest food carry. So you want to do it when you're fittest. Whereas in the northern parts, there's more options to hitchhike to towns. We all asleep?
I've got one
Kind of the
more.
opposite.
Yeah.
Fried.
Have you ever used solar charge, like lightweight solar charging for your devices on the trail? or you just go with the power banks?
We haven't used solar panels
For a long time, yeah.
Yeah, I think a few years ago, at least, when we last looked at it, they just weren't efficient enough, if that makes sense. It's kind of, they had to have full sunlight to actually work well, and a lot of the time you don't get that. And so it's not as reliable as a power bank. That being said, there could be some really new options that we just don't know about.
Then the solar panels work really well if you're hiking in like Southern California, where it's sunny and open every day. But a lot of solar panels, if they get intermittent sun, they don't charge. And if they're not, and they have problems with charging the device itself, like with a trickle charge, you have to be able to charge something that can accept this low intermittent current. And then if you charge to a power bank, you have problems with the power bank overheating because it's in the sun and the electronics get fried. So it's not really, I don't think it's not a very common solution, or the people who are using the solar panels, they're the people who are like, they're sitting at camp all day, for a whole day, and they're letting it like, you could let it charge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Nick said, I mean, if you had southbound, the sun's at your back and you could in theory charge. Yeah, it's like the AAWT will eat your solar panel. That's what will happen. Like it'll disappear. It's inevitable. How long is the longest food carry in kilometers? That is something that you can look on the track guide. I can't remember the exact number.
We have an exact number because it's so dependent on where you put your food drops.
Yeah, and your hitching level of comfort, and if you have friends that you can call in to, cut the longest carry in half or something. It's a very personal thing figuring out your food solution for this track.
And we'll have another session on resupplies at some point anyway, so
yeah,
we can delve more into that at that time.
Yeah, afternoon storms is no sun. Yeah, I remember the first time I did the AAWT, it rained every day the first 7 days. And on day 7, if I could have quit, I would have, but I was stuck there. Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. Great. Well, you can always send them through on Facebook or Instagram or email or whatever. Yeah, I think it'll probably be 2 weeks until the next session.
Yep.
We're off in the Flinders next week, which will be fun. Yeah, so thank you very much for coming, guys. We hope that this was useful. I know that it can seem like a daunting track to prepare for. The reality is the hardest part is getting to the start. Once you get to the start, it will all happen. So
yeah, and we would also really appreciate any suggestions you have for other topics you want to cover. We've listed at the start of the presentation what we thought would be good topics, but if there's something in particular you want to cover, just please let us know, and yeah, we'll see how we can get it to fit.
Yeah.
So are you going to put the slides anywhere we can check them out again, just for like, I guess those water carriers are on your website and stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, so nothing in the slides is not available on our website in the track guide. We will also be putting this recording up on YouTube. So
you can listen to it at like triple speed.
We're going to feature.
Yeah. So you'll be able to watch it all again if you want, and otherwise the track guide is really useful. Otherwise you can just send us a message if there's a particular part that you want more information on.
Yeah.
All your handles are in the email or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy your exciting Friday evening.
Cheers. Thanks so much. Yeah, much appreciated. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.